Happy Sabbath, everyone. Happy Sabbath. Uh, Thankfully, this week was a little cooler than weeks before. So I thought I was enjoying my week, but according to our high schoolers, there was someone who didn't really have a good week. But hopefully, uh, this week they'll have some good time. Uh, when I was young, or okay, sounds a little wrong, but I used to love watching K dramas. When I was watching it, I think I watched majority of it when I was in like high school. I followed all the way through, and um, if someone asked me, "Did you watch this?" and I'll say yes. Did you watch that? I'll say yes. And if they ask me about it, I know about it. And it gets to a level where I watch this so much that if I watch any Korean drama or first episode, I kind of know what's gonna happen in the last episode. That's why it became so boring to me. But one of the occurring theme or pattern in K drama is coincidence, right? Like they were totally different life, and then at one episode they bump into each other, and the romance begin, right? Like, and also like this rich boy loves poor girl. Those kind of, like that never happens in our life, but coincidentally, like it's a fictional thing. And when I was reading Ruth, at first, when I was especially reading chapter 2, I saw some similarity that I saw in K drama. Because I'll explain later, but how Boaz and Ruth met and how she came to the field of Boaz it looks like coincidence. But before we go further, I want to kind of look into Book of Ruth. Like Pastor Tim mentioned last week, Book of Ruth is a pretty interesting book. If you look at the story of the whole Bible, Book of Ruth seems like is not related at all. If you take out the Book of Ruth and go from Judges straight to Samuel, story-wise, it doesn't make any difference or awkwardness. Then why is Book of Ruth in the Bible? As we study chapter 2 together, I want to find the answer to this question. Before we read chapter 2 together, there's something I want to say about Book of Ruth or Bible story in general. When I was preparing for the sermon, one thing that I kind of realized is that I treated the Bible story as more like a fable or some sort of a like fairy tale. Anytime I read the Bible story, I kind of noticed when I was reading chapter 2 of Ruth was that I was treating them as some sort of things that I had to get a message out of, or I need to find something in those stories. But when I repeatedly read chapter 2 and overall Book of Ruth, when I treated Book of Ruth as more like a historical story rather than something fable or fictional, I start to notice a little bit more other than that. So before anything, I want everyone to keep in mind that we're gonna dissect the story more like a actual event rather than some sort of a fable. Our scripture reading is Ruth chapter 2:20. The Lord bless him. Now he says to his daughter-in-law, he has not stopped showing his kindness to living and dead. She added, the man, our close relative, he's one of our guardian redeemer. Do you guys know what his guardian redeemer is? So before anything, we need to understand what it means to understand chapter 2. If you look at Leviticus, there's God is giving instruction to Israelites, and he says, the land is mine, and you reside in my land as foreigner and strangers. So when God gave land to Israelites, he didn't give them as a full possession, but it was more like renting it to Israelites. This is one of God's system it's more like a social system of Israelites. So if one of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. So for example, if I get poor and I sold my land, later my relative, probably closest to my brother, would come and redeem it for me, which means basically pay the debt. That's the concept of guardian redeemer. And also God added that in the year of Jubilee, it will return to the, they can come back to their original property. So the year of Jubilee comes every 50 year. That means every 50 year, the land transaction would be reset to the original state. So that means that if even you lost all your money or all your property, eventually you regain it back in year of Jubilee. So let's kind of think about, like I said before, I want to think about the story of Ruth as more historical thing. If you look at the chapter 1 of the first verse, it says this is the story happened during the time of the judges. And do you guys know what was it like to live in a time period of the judges during the Israelites? If you look at the last verse, I think we read it last week, it says that Israelites did not follow God's law and did whatever they heart desired. So do you think the Israelites were keeping the God's law, or were they doing whatever they want? They were doing whatever they want. And weirdly, if you look at the beginning of chapter 2, chapter 1 was basically talking about only Naomi and Ruth and how they migrated to Moab and they lost their husband and sons and they came back to Israel. And suddenly, this man called Boaz comes up. And then in verse 2, it says, Ruth the Moabite says to Naomi, let me go to the field and pick up the leftover grains. And you might wonder, why is she not working? Why is she going out to the field and picking up the leftover grain? This is also the social system that God built for Israelites. In Leviticus chapter 19 and Deuteronomy, God told Israelites that do not cut the edge of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord of your God. And if you look at Deuteronomy, it says, leave it for the foreigner and the fatherless and the widow. Doesn't it kind of ring a bell? It kind of sounds like it's leaving those things for the Ruth, right? Because she was foreigner, she was not fatherless, but since she came to Israelite and leaving the Moab behind, she was fatherless and she was also widow. And this is the part that I felt like, the next part, I felt like this was the K-drama, the book of Ruth was kind of K-drama. Because in verse 3 and 4, it says, as it turned out, and just then. This is very coincidental, right? Have you guys heard of the phrase, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous? When I searched it up, it says Albert Einstein was he quoted, but apparently is wrong. So I don't know who actually said this the first time, but when I read the story of Ruth and look at this quote, this is exactly how God worked on the Ruth, right? What is the possibility of Moabite woman marrying Israelites, losing the husband, and come to Israelite and marry a different man, and became a grandmother of King David, and eventually the ancestor of Jesus? This is the reason why we should kind of pay our attention to coincidence. It might be God's guidance. If you look at the definition of coincidence, it says a remarkable occurrence of events or circumstance without apparent casual connection. And one thing that I was kind of thinking about when I was reading Book of Ruth is that if you're the owner of your life, it is a coincidence. But if the God is the owner of your life, it's a divine guidance. When I was reading Book of Ruth, one thing that I was questioning was, why didn't God just give everything to Ruth and Naomi instead of giving it through Boaz? Is it because God is not powerful enough? When and if you look at the Bible, usually God rarely kind of speaks to you individually. Of course, like time like Moses or other appearances, but usually God speaks through someone, through prophets. And because a lot of the books in the Bibles are about prophet, it feels like God is always speaking to you. But in many occasions, and even in our lives, God always speaks through other people and through other lives. And that's why when we look at our lives and see someone or experience something, we have to pay attention and see if there's a divine guidance. Let's go to the next verse. In verse 5 through 6, Boaz came to his field and asked his harvesters and saw Ruth. And he asked, who's this woman? And then the overseer replied, she's a Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. She says, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters. She came to the field and has remained here from morning till now, except for a short rest in a shelter. Let's say you're the owner of the field, and because of the God's law, you have to kind of give those precious grain that you have grown to those people. And if someone comes to your field and pick up what you left very diligently, like for a long time, would you feel happy or would you feel like a little annoyed? Because I was, maybe not everyone here is evil as I am, but I'll be a little annoyed if she just constantly pick up the things that I left out because they could have been mine. But this also shows that how diligent Ruth was, right? She was a foreigner and she came to this field, to the foreign land, and following foreign laws and picking up the things for her mother-in-law. That's why I think Boaz, when he saw how diligent Ruth was, he says that don't go and glean in other field and don't go away from here. Stay here with women who work with you. Watch the field where the men are harvesting and follow along after the woman. I've told the man not to lay hand on you. And whenever you're thirsty, go and get a drink from a water jar that men have filled. Let me ask you something. Is church more fun or is the world more fun? Let's say if I give a free ticket to Universal today, who would stay here or who would go to Universal? Right. I mean, I'm sure some people will stay and some people would choose Universal, but usually, by looking at it, the world is much more interesting than church, right? And like Boaz here, Boaz's field might be not as fun as might be other field, or might be beneficial as other field, but he's asking Ruth to stay here and have a drink when you're thirsty and eat something when she's hungry. This is very similar to what Jesus says when he says, let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink, right? Because the field owners, they don't have any obligation to give water or food to the people who are gathering or gleaning from their field. And that's why in next verse, Ruth said, why have I such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner? And when I was thinking about this, I was kind of thinking about the relationship between Moabites and the Israelites. So Moabite and Israelites, they're placed right next to each other. And as Korean, we have a similar neighbor like that. Japanese, right? I know we're like a lot of people here from spend more time in America, and that you might not be familiar with how the tension between the Korean and Japanese, but they're pretty fierce. There's a generational kind of hatred. And even God said in Deuteronomy that no Ammonites or Moabites or any of their descendants may enter the assembly of the Lord, not even in the 10th generation. And he says, do not seek treaty of friendship with them as long as you live. Because if you look at the history between Moabites and the Israelites, it's always either war or a cursing or some sort of nothing positive. That's why Ruth says, as a foreigner, why are you such a, we're so nice to me, right? But then I want to look at who Boaz was. Boaz was, if you look at the Matthew chapter 1, is a genealogy of Jesus. And if you look at verse 5 and 6, it says, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. And as we know, Rahab was the woman who lived in Jericho. And she was a prostitute. Since his mother was Rahab, was foreigner, maybe when Boaz looked at the Ruth, he might feel some more compassion to her. Because although Rahab was a woman of faith and helped Israelites to conquer the Jericho, Israelites know who she was, right? That means that she was probably treated a little differently than other Israelites at the time. And as her son, Boaz might have also experienced similar thing. It might be not like a discrimination, but it's a subtle difference between how they treat the other Israelite women and the Rahab. And when Boaz looked at Ruth, it probably reminds of her mother. And also, Boaz heard what Ruth had done. It says, I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and your homeland and came to live with people you did not know before. May you be richly rewarded with the Lord, God of Israel, under those wings you have come to take refuge. Ruth was a foreigner to Israelites. And I want to kind of think about us as well. Are we foreigner to God? You might argue differently, but by nature, just like how Moabites and Israelites are different, we're supposed to be different than God, right? Because we're supposed to be part of Satan. Because Adam chose Satan over God in the Garden of Eden. But just like how Ruth was changed after she met with Naomi's family, our life has changed and altered because of encounter with God. And just like how she left her homeland and left her father and mother, from what was supposed to be Satan's, we converted from Satan and turned into Christian, right? And when Boaz saw that and saw how she was diligent to his mother-in-law, he wanted to do something to Ruth because he felt so moved. Right? In a similar way, when God looked at us and see how we're fighting our sinful nature, trying to be more like God, trying to be more like Christian, when he sees us those struggle, he'll probably think very fond of us as well, just like how Boaz looked at Ruth and she was moved. And in this next verse, Boaz gave her food and drinks. And also, he offered some grain, which is, she says she ate it all, and she ate all she wanted and has some left over. And she packed those for her mother-in-law. And after that, what Boaz ordered his man is that let her gather among the sheaves and don't reprimand her. Even pull out some stacks from the bundle and leaves them for her to pick up and don't rebuke her. If you really think about this is a little crazy. Because what she's saying is that takes whatever is rightfully his and give it to her. Right? They were only supposed to gather what was dropped and glean over. But what Boaz is doing to Ruth is that he's giving more things than what Ruth deserved. And as a result, the amount she gathered was epek. And epek is about 22 liters. It's about 4.8 gallons. Oh. So that's about 11 bottles of those 2-liter soda cans, so soda bottles. Imagine how much that is. That's so much, right? If you gather maybe 1 or 2 liters a bottle a day, you might be lucky. But for her, she gathered 11. That's how much basically Boaz gave it to her. And naturally, when her mother-in-law, when Naomi saw that, she was surprised, right? Where did you glean today? Or where did you work? Blessed to be the man who took notice of you. And then Ruth realized who Boaz was, right? Ruth told his mother-in-law about the one at whose place she had been working. The name of the man I worked with today is Boaz, she said. The Lord bless him, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to living and to dead. She added, that man is our close relative. This is one of our guardian redeemer. And it says, the chapter basically ends with kind of telling us how long that Ruth has stayed with Boaz. She says she gleaned until the barley and wheat harvest was finished. And when I searched it up, so barley was harvested usually around from late March to April, and wheat was harvested through May to June. So that means she was spending her time with Boaz for about, if you take it long, 4 months to 3 months. So what is the purpose of Ruth? As I kind of said in the beginning, the question I asked before was, what is the purpose of Ruth in the Bible? And as we know, book of the Bible is directed to only one figure in the Bible, right? Jesus. This is a great example of how God guided seemingly unrelated Boaz and Ruth to demonstrate the grace of God to us. As I said earlier, who's a descendant of Boaz? It's Jesus, right? When Boaz says, I've been told about what you have done, and I know what you have done to your mother-in-law, how you treated mother-in-law, how you're diligent, and you came to live with us. Like it says, that moved his heart. Although it was a coincidental encounter with Ruth and Boaz, God was the one who directed them, and God was the one who moved his heart. And in a similar way, when we work our lives, fight our struggles to become like a good Christian, God sees the struggle. And he's trying to give us bread and wine, which was not supposed to be our right? Just like how Ruth was foreigner, like I said, we're foreigner to God as well. And just like how Boaz was generous to Ruth because he was moved, when God sees our struggle to become a good Christian, when we see those things, he wants to give us everything as well. And to answer the question that I asked before, the purpose of Book of Ruth is to show us how our Redeemer, Jesus, will save us from the sin. There's no other reasoning of Ruth, the Book of Ruth, other than that. Right? Because like I said, Book of Ruth is irrelevant to is not relevant to the whole story of the Bible. But because God wants to emphasize and how he acted upon the Ruth and Boaz to lead to the Redeemer, Jesus, for us. And that's why he included this story in the Bible. For next week, I know that it might be still chaotic and it might be still confusing, but I want everyone to remember this fact that Jesus is our Redeemer, and whatever struggle that we're going through, instead of kind of questioning why we're going through this, I want everyone to kind of look at Jesus and remember he's our Savior.